Yes. Okay. Everything's live streaming. Okay. Hi to all readers and viewers for the Boston Poetry Marathon. We had a little bump in the road, but we're back. We're here. We're ready to read some poetry. I'm Gilmore Tamney. Our technical host is Christina Liu. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Our organizer for this year's Boston Poetry Marathon online for 2021 are Christina Liu, Tina Strong, Suzanne Mercury, and Bridget Eileen. Thank you to the organizers. And how, right? Woo! Thank you to our volunteers for the weekend, Gilmore Tamney, Daniel Pritchard, Tom Daly, Joe Elliott, Douglas Rothschild, and Chad Parenteau as special assistant to Carol Weston. We are streaming live to our Facebook page at Boston Poetry Marathon, our Twitter via Periscope at Boss Poetry Mara, all one word, and live on our YouTube channel. For links to these broadcasts, go to bostonpoetrymarathon.wordpress.com/watch. This year's Boston Poetry Marathon is a fundraiser for local organizations that work for racial justice in support of the Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate movements. Donations will go to Sista Fire, Rhode Island, the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, and the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. You've been doing real good on those donations, I think, too. Admission to the Boston Poetry Marathon is free, but a $10 or more donation to our fundraiser is recommended and appreciated. So please go to bostonpoetrymarathon.wordpress.com/donate for more info. Go to the pinned posts or the bios in social media for those links as well. Okay, I'm going to introduce the readers right now. They'll do a quick hello. I think we don't need to do that maybe because we're all good, right? We've heard everybody. Okay, great. All right. So if we could have all but our first reader now mute themselves. Okay, great. We'll switch to speaker view. Great. Okay, our first reader is Carla Schwartz.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Gilmore, and everybody for watching. And this first poem I'm going to read to you is actually a pandemic poem of sorts and also an elegy, and it's called 2020, Were You to Have Lived. You would have sat down at the kitchen table with my father that January night, might have been the one to cook dinner for him, maybe a frozen soup. And even though he was not feeling well, he might not have been so indifferent as to wear his pajamas to dinner. Together at the table, you would have been there when his knees folded under as he tried to stand up, might even have caught him, or you'd have driven him to the doctor that day, or you'd have had more sense than him to stop the both of you from driving by then. You would have had a smartphone, would have taken it in hand, punched up an Uber, and when my father recovered, you'd sit calmly discussing whom to vote for, Bernie or Kamala. When the pandemic shut everything down, you would have both worn masks among strangers, maybe taken strolls around the block. But when you'd learned about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, you'd remember the Nazi soldiers with their guns bursting into your home, would have mourned for lives lost, mourned for being too old to stand and protest. The two of you would have kept company. You'd have handled the technology, ordered meals, played the piano, video chatted with your friends. But by then you were long dead, and when my father's knees buckled him to the floor, as he lay there unable to rise, he might have looked up, heard you call to him until the ambulance came. So that's my first poem I'm reading. And the next poem that I'm going to read to you is called Turntable Park. To return home, we go by kayak. The lake this night, not calm, but stirred up. Before leaving the dock, I turn on the light at the end of my boat for safety, I think. But underway, it blinds me. Alone in my kayak, ahead of you, blinded in the white darkness, I'm afraid a wave might drive my boat into a rock. When you catch up, you switch off my light in a frenzied, blown about moment when we both almost crash into the shore, but then we master the fetch and head south toward our cove. Almost home, we look up at the moon and agree how lovely it is on this lake. This day could have been like any other, except I said bike path. So kayaks. So what the wind, the rain, the waves. So car, so bikes, stone dust, and autumn leaves fringing the lakeside trail as the lakeside trail we must follow to its finish, Turntable Park. Because how could you stop short of a park named for the mechanism that turns trains around, a backtracking that anyone might hope for? And if I have time, I'm going to finish with one more poem, which is called Olympus. Keep it on auto, I say, and snap 2 photos of my husband, Mel, and explain how to review them. Then I hand over the Olympus, his first digital, as he has to learn. Mel's going to China, another 3-week trek, and he wants to share his journey with me in images when he comes back. He's done this kind of trekking before, Nepal, Peru, Bosnia. In the past, he's left the photography to the experts, returns with old, low-resolution postcards and cheap t-shirts, lots of them. Sometimes he brings back a rug, sometimes a necklace for me. It's all too much stuff and weighs on me, especially today. I feel so tired. I think it's the Lyme come back, and I just want to sit. But I say, look, here's the power button. It says on, off. Here's the zoom. If you want, keep it on auto. You won't have to worry about the light, the speed. He can't stop thinking about the old Leica and his light meter and says,
Carla, we're at 5 here.
okay, sorry.
Okay. All right. Yep. Pardon. Wonderful reading. I'm the bouncer today.
That's all right. It's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Next up, Cynthia Mendes. Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This poem is called Stardust. I am told we are made of stardust, star stuff. I am told this as if it were old, as if this body is ancient intergalactic recycled material that does not resemble a star anymore, as if I function differently than a star now. Isn't the matter in me still a star? Don't I still have nuclear fusion in my core? Don't I still burn inside? Am I not still contained by gravity? Don't I also still create one? What keeps me whole? What keeps me from being scattered? Keeps me from being useless matter? What keeps me from being a transparent, dusty nebula floating through space? What is the thing that puts me together, that keeps me round and centered and fiery and luminous? Isn't it the stellar forces within me met by the equal external pressures on me, sparked? What do you call the energy in me that wants to expand? That internal convection that won't stop, that makes me want to draw in everything in my reach and pull it into myself, make it a part of myself, that wants to consume because I can, because I am, that thing that radiates from my soul, healing and heat? Is it not also contained like a star? Is it not also met with equal forces outside that say, stay put? Am I not also stifled by a galaxy that says, this is your limit, only this far. This is your circle, your orbit. Stay in your lane. Doesn't the universe also place me somewhere and spin me until my lights burn out? Tell me I'm not a star. Tell me it doesn't feel like I've been here forever. Tell me that my ending is not light years away. Tell me that I am not also simultaneously fragile, that this homeostasis cannot easily be shattered if you rob me of a single element, that my existence is not balanced on the head of a molecule, that I cannot just spontaneously combust, and I won't take the whole world with me, that I won't also create a black hole when I leave, that another star just could never replace, and that there will be an external vacuum where I used to shine. Tell me I'm not a star now. Tell me you won't see my light long after I leave you. Haven't I also been explored from a safe distance, but never fully comprehended? Haven't I also been used as a lucky charm, reduced to someone's goodnight wish? Haven't they tried to chart my spectrum and put me in a class? Isn't my stability a concern? My mass measured? My output gauged? Isn't my distance constantly looked at like a challenge to be invaded upon, calculated, conquered? Haven't I also been given a name by people that think they know me and what I am made of? I am not the remnants of a star. I am the evolution of it. I will not die and be absorbed into the heavens and become a star again. That is already where I am and what I've always been. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cynthia. Next up is Tara Webb. How are you? Okay. You ready? Unmuted?
Yes, I'm unmuted and I'm ready. Hi, I'm Tara. I'm going to be reading some poems from a project I've been working on. They're erasures from presidential State of the Union addresses. There are a lot of them, so this is only a couple of them. There will be some pauses, and you can imagine those as like large swaths of redacted text. Woodrow Wilson, 1918, Gentlemen of the Congress. On the sea, dangers were alike strange and infinite. I tell you what lay in the back of their pupils. We learned quickly to serve the world, and ready for the test, those of us who stayed at home fought, our manhoods cheap. It was back, back, back for their enemies in the coal mines and iron mines and copper mines, in the shipyards, on the railways, at the docks, on the sea. And now we are sure of it. Come in its completeness, a new order, our return, because the world has still to be fed, and the ships are still needed to send supplies to our men and to bring the men back, and to put knowledge in these bodies cut and desolate. I've spoken to the raw dead of the steadying of their burden. Some new element, I think, can transcend this. May I not hope that in these delicate tasks, I shall be happy? George Bush Sr., 1992. There's some laughter in this one, in the transcript, so I'm going to say laughter, or I'll just put my hands up. You can imagine people laughing. The history of man died this year. In the world, in my life, in our lives, look homeward. The long roll call, all the ones we put forth, Ones who left signs in the desert that said, I saw Elvis. Kids we've sent out into the world. Tomorrow our children will go to school. But long, drawn out dread was when the war began. In this chamber, your patriots, new, dazzling, smarter on this score, this evening, holding everyone at this hour wrong, and they know it. Let's be frank. My heart and my aim lack. I burst and break down, languishing with pride. Choice is a burden. Call upon the moon, look hard. It is the miracle that is this night. I'll just do one more. John Adams, 1798. Gentlemen of the Senate and gentlemen of the House of Representatives, repeat the sickness here. The ultimate failure of power is power. Preparation for war can alone ensure peace. Jealous of suffering, people run the boundaries westward. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely and presidential. Okay, I'm about to qualify that and then be exhausting. Okay, next up is Daniel Pritchard.
Hi. Thanks so much to the organizers this year for all the work that they're putting in. It means so much to be able to be together virtually at a difficult time. My first poem is titled 7 Years. I walked a stitchwork path along the seam of the river after it ended between us, knotting strands of memory. Through the sleep of winter and the wet of spring, I walked and walked until the night was cut by a 1,000-year comet. I noticed the stars then and how they gathered pale halos as if it were about to snow. August had its own grammar, and all I had to do was say it. I want to touch your skin, your mouth. I did, always. But what do we know of always? We know that by the end of July, the cut ranunculus will have wilted into a petal bed of pale, crumbled sheets. I hope you have one now, kept flush in the clear vase of a person whose love has the vernacular you need for the life you want. All we have are conjugations of distance and modifiers that stage this long grief abruptly, inevitably, the noun of our 7 years. Now you'll have to say the rest yourself. This next one is called Daylight Savings. Past the salt marsh, a second twilight was raised up across the neighborhood, orange and pomegranate. At the window, fireflies. My daughter ran to catch them in a pickle jar. They fell yellow and pink, blinking at the lip of the glass and fading inside. She giggled and spun and lifted up the jar like her own personal moon. But when she turned back, her face and hands were pocked, her blue dress streaked with gray. Not fireflies at all, but ash from a burning wildfire some miles away. Our neighbor stood out beside the ceramic donkey in his front yard, watering his own roof under the white grin of a surgical mask. His spray, caught in the wind, arched over us, dusting our bare heads, while my daughter cried for the daylight dying in her arms. And this last poem is a translation of a poem by the Cuban dissident poet Jorge Olivera Castillo. risk of extinction. It has been a long time since we cried, or since it rained in this disenchanted kingdom. There are stones, hardened faces, and some sand dunes caressed by the sun through the blinds of dawn. Why did they confiscate all the mirrors and rags of our delusions? Was it to humanize death? Here is the truth. We remain in this arid vortex with our eyes fixed on these messages, on so many dispatches. With no strength left to cry, we wait for the waters foretold. Thanks again to the organizers and all of you for listening.
Thanks, Daniel. Next up is Christine Jones, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you, everybody. So nice to hear new and different voices. Okay, I'm going to read one poem, a long poem. It's from my recent manuscript written in response to my mom's progressive Alzheimer's and my sort of new relationship with her and actually with time, which is really sort of a new and wild relationship, called Not a Bird. Mom, it isn't. Even before you repeated yourself and your days, before you taught me to say grace, time was never a bird. Rather, it's the bread you throw for the sparrow that lands on the hedges, the raw slide of an oyster, sand flats, figure lines, loamy blooms, my strand of hair in the shower stall, a green-eyed girl in Delhi knocking on our dusty Subaru, sugar crystals and fennel seeds, brailed bark and pickled beets from the foothills of Wyoming, far from the right whale's spray, and the sunlight's cross on the dune shack's door. The world redeeming itself, revealing a small hole in the screen. The blue eggshell and the lawn, the habitual piles you make with your flowered gloves and merry rake, the lemon gelato melting on the nightstand, roses in a jelly jar. 2 feet in the ocean, a fork-tailed pompano caught with rod and reel, and the olive oil we drink from a farm in Crete. Are you there, Mom, with the goats bleeding in the gorge, flowing down the mountain trail in the rain through the scrub pines, or along the Seine to the floating piscine? We find answers within hives, hanging from the eaves of the shed. Another shovel, another wasp. What or who gets to live? The great horned owl probes. A mouse in the trap, not quite dead. Have you noticed the nest and the budding crepe myrtle? Yes, we've been here for quite a while. Maybe it was you at the top of the Ferris wheel, paused, overlooking the city of lights. I forgive you, my missed birthday, unpenciled on the calendar that still leans against your desk. Time is not a bird. It is 12 pairs of swans streaming in the cove, your placid face preserving their wake. The sea glass found on shore, held in a tiny terracotta bowl, carved in a Florida bite, and the bottom of a thrown clay vase. It's inked on the wall behind the bureau of an attic room or marked with an X on a kid-drawn map. It rides the biplane, great white sharks and harbor seals spotted below. It rises with the sea, changes with easterly winds, pivoting the archangel statue mounted on the cathedral roof. Can you hear the choir's collected voices? Cashmere snowbanks glisten, reminiscent of your native tongue. Oui, oui, la vie est belle. Time. It is the chase of the osprey by the swallow, the ripple in the marsh where the heron, one-legged, stands and minnows flick between grasses. Infinite holes of soft-shell clams, Swiss-chard seedlings, and the first forsythia and daffodil. A bottle captures it, crossing an ocean, where a boy finds it at low tide. Oh, time, you will or will not hide how will fare the loss of a mother in a warm bed. Follow the tributaries. She's floating on the pool's lounge chair, sun rising under the blue lock of her eye. Now she sees it as a buoy and not a duck. She's wearing her Sunday best, plum sweater, and a gold cross around her neck. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. Let's see, who's up next? Amanda Hope. Oh, yeah, Amanda Hope, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the organizers for organizing this massive event. My first poem is called How to Land, and there's just a couple things you might need to know about it. I reference Mithridates, who is the king who dosed himself with poison so as to become immune to poisoning. And also the 5 remembrances, which are a Buddhist thing where you're supposed to remind yourself that it is the natural order of things for you to die, for you to grow old, for you to become sick, and for everything you love to change and be parted from you at some point. So this poem is called How to Land. Watching a bicycle pitch forward over its front wheel, its rider gripped by relentless physics. It is impossible not to be aware of the penalties of being embodied, how unlikely it is to have been alive at all, and how preposterous that we expect to continue, as though we are not water balloons, which may break at any impact. If I had to know this all the time without relent, the doctors would need to prescribe something to me, not because I was wrong, but because truth untempered would take from me every moment before whatever is going to happen finishes happening, the way a stiff breeze sent apple blossoms across the seat of my car as I opened the door, or the perfect quiet of the house as my beloved bikes away on some errand. Doctor, fasten the lid on that kind of knowing, or else let me dose myself like Mithridates with the 5 remembrances, a bit more each day, until the shock of knowledge doesn't send me crawling from my numb skin every time. This is called The Volunteer. It's referencing an article written by Roger Fisher in the 80s on how to prevent nuclear war. He said, put the nuclear launch code in a little capsule and then implant that capsule right next to the heart of a volunteer. The volunteer would carry with him a big, heavy butcher knife as he accompanied the president. If ever the president wanted to fire nuclear weapons, the only way he could do so would be for him first, with his own hands, to kill one human being. The Volunteer. At first, I tried to be aloof, standing in attendance bland as a briefcase. When I could not disappear my humanity, I tried being amiable, as though good cheer were an argument for existence. Then I decided that my existence would have to be its own argument, a person more or less like other people, with the exception of the detonator nestled beneath the ventricle. I am his constant companion, more reliable than the average shadow. Agendaless, without affiliation, I am merely a container, the correct shape for its cargo, like the hollow plastic onions they sell at the grocery for storing half-used onions. The knife that hangs at my side, once unsheathed, is long enough to cross oceans. It is not that he is an unkind or difficult man. We talk sometimes about the places we grew up, or about football, its intricacies giving our conversation the illusion of substance. Duty sits between us, like a dog of unknown temperament. And this last poem is called Sumac. I tried to write a poem about the sumac, but my heart wasn't in it. It should have been like that one HD wrote with the pears. They say dogs can tell if you're saying something unkind to them, even if you say it in a sweet voice. The poem can tell too, if you write a thing without believing it. It sinks like a rock to the bottom of your badly evoked lake. You have to feel fervently that the pears require our attention. You have to know in your soul that it all depends on the wheelbarrow. I am not sure about the sumac. You can make a tart tea with its berries, but they grow too high for people to easily reach. I would like it if everything depended on it. It would be comforting to make a metaphor of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Carrie Bennett, come on down.
Great, thanks. I'm going to read one poem. It's a little longer. It's new and feels messy, so thank you for listening. Notes on extinction. 1. First, there were so many trees like a bright colony of leaf and root of 1 billion American beech, red oak, sweet birch trees, and grassland. Oh, little blue stem, oh, berry bushes and wild roses and stunted aspens. 2. The tools line up in my mind. Man and horse, axe, bill hook, cant hook, chain, cross-cut saw, crowbar, maul, and wedge. 3. If only the stream was strong enough to stop the next step, though I understand fantasy is different from fable, so I include chainsaw. 4. The animals with feathers were captured and corralled in cages the size of a single piece of paper, and the animals with fur were funneled into metal fences to become a breathing factory of future food, repopulate, repeat into the furthest corner of each field. 5. My body is also ghost and meat. I know I am no better. 6. A field reflects my burden to wear both particle and material waste. I don't know what I expected, that the objects I bought would somehow save me. How stupid to worship something stored outside my own body. 7. What I know is the trapdoor will not grow into emerald, and hawk is a language that answers only to speed and freedom. 8. My fear hovers above like a hard forest. Forgive me the wind that has always pushed in my chest. Forgive me my mouth and its constant hunger. The evidence of my extravagance is nothing like pollen, though my fingernails are beginning to sprout, and my body is a question I am trying to live with. Thank you.
Okay, short and sweet. Thanks, Carrie. Okay, we are on to, Mr. Michael Gottlieb.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you, Christina and Suzanne. Appreciate Christina for all your hard work. I'm going to read from a book that Ruth published in 1999. And I picked this because, and here comes the plug, it's going to be appearing again in a book that Trax Press is bringing out, my selected poems, in September. So thank you, James Sherry, for publishing this 22 years ago, and thank you for Charles Alexander for what you're about to bring back from the printer in a few weeks. So, Gorgeous Plunge 1. What doesn't kill us makes us weaker. Across the sky, a missing man formation. Like that untoward ardor for precedence, that way of styling oneself, those illiberal disaffections, all speaking so poorly for our powers of abeyance, inference, investiture, endurance. In this lattice of derision, a ragtag, a nattered remainder, calumnied, unweighted, They are waiting here, the company entire. That is not really us, we say. Just because it's in my car doesn't mean it's mine. The unnumbered lot, the waste plot, the stringently incurious applying the barmicide, administering the drubbing anew, the whirling disease. Not enough. Never nearly enough of the merry men, the past masters. They were here just a minute ago. This can kill you too, just as easily. Too much poetry. Poetry can be bad for your health. The ones dragged along, driven off, ridden to exhaustion, to distraction, to all ends, driven down, withering under the pitying exposure. Do not shake the appalling results. The old-fashions, the Manhattans, the last of the Delawares, the trophies and the captives here on the northern branch, along with the fragiles and the rushes and the ground rapes. Raised, that is organized, fully subscribed, like a hopeful fated regiment at first sight, upon first publication. Point away from face and other people when opening. We become our lists. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, rounding things out is Anna VQ Ross. Take it away.
Hi, thanks everyone for this great hour of words and to the organizers for bringing us all together. I'm going to read 3 poems, I think, from my forthcoming book, and I haven't read any of them aloud before, so forgive the nerves. This is the first poem in the book. House. I come from there with lavender growing small against the bricks. I come from there with a little white jug and a tea towel on the tray. I come from there with a worn stair rug and a wooden banister, leading up 2 floors past bedroom doors to a room at the very top, with a window looking down to a square of grass and a garden wall, where roses grow with tangled canes rooting between the cracks. I come from where I once was told someone attached a lock on her bedroom door and didn't say why or who she feared might open it through all the years she stayed in the house with lavender grown small against the bricks, and the roses rooting through the wall, and the tea towel on the tray, and the little white jug and worn stair rug she descended the day she went away. I come from there. What is the poem? Is it an apparition, a machine of memory, or the story of remembering? This one begins in summer with a girl alone in her room, changing out of her bathing suit. The damp polyester sucking down her flat girl chest, barely needing to stretch over the slight flare of hips and pelvis and thighs to slide past her calves to the floor. It continues when her cousin slams open the door. It continues when he pins her silent to the bed and pries her fingers one by one, and then each thumb from what she tries to hide, then stretches wide her arms and legs to look at all the places the bathing suit has touched. What happened next? Did a voice in the hall intervene? Was he afraid I'd remember my own and scream? The poem doesn't know why he let go, leaving the door flapping after him, useless as a single wing. And the grown-ups in the kitchen didn't ask, just kids when I ran past and out to the yard's dry grass. But by then there was an order to things, a door the poem keeps forcing open as I twist my shoulders back into the bathing suit's straps, lifting them up and over, up and over. And this is the last one. My son hands me the family letter about this unit, page torn from his 4th grade math book. I'm supposed to read it, considering how geometry and classifying shapes, some words are highlighted so I get the gist, might fit into dinner table chat or fights about whose turn it is to take a bath first tonight. I misread convert as covert and lose minutes wondering what a covert measurement could be and why. But no one wants to know they're being measured or tested, do they? Even though we are every day, all our angry faces, likes and hearts totted up, politicians and yogurts we prefer, a pointillist scrim gluing us to the world, little sticky bits tracing wherever we've been. But maybe I should say I, not we. I don't like being tested. My husband, for instance, doesn't seem to mind. Almost high school dropout with a perfect score on his SAT. But all those choices freeze me. The family letter tells me I should encourage your child to explain. True or false? I am a good mother if I'm always awake and dressed before my children. True or false? I am a bad mother. If I give up blank and start blanking 3 to 5 times a week, I am a good mother, wife, other. Please identify my lines of symmetry. But in high school, I liked geometry, maybe because my teacher drove a sky blue Corvette and wore polyester skirt suits, and maybe because the tests felt like stories of how one shape could become another, divided but still itself. I liked that I could see it happening point by point, the way every night after my husband and the kids are asleep, I go around the house, clicking off each light until I become invisible, even to myself.
Great. Thanks, Anna VQ Ross. Okay. So we're going back to the grid view. You got that? Thanks to everyone. We have Carla Schwartz, Cynthia Mendes, so sorry, Tara Webb, Daniel Pritchard, Christine Jones, Amanda Hope, Carrie Bennett, Michael Gottlieb, Anna VQ Ross. Okay, applaud yourselves. Let's hear it for the spoken, thought, written word. All good stuff. Okay, so next up, this is why you can see I have my hub here. Next hour, we'll be reading Ethel Racken, Dick Lurie, Elizabeth Guthrie, Mark Pollack, Elizabeth Marie Young, Michael Steffen, Jennifer Martelli, MP Carver, Valerie Loveland, Stephanie Kaler, and Tom Daly. So stick around for that. And we'll be right back after a short break. Okay, great.